Fantasy Island was the show where every wish could come true, and every ending felt magical. But when the cameras stopped, its cast stepped into a reality far darker than any storyline. Loss, scandal, and cruel illnesses followed them long after the show's glow faded. What really happened to the stars you once loved? Let's uncover the truth. Ricardo Montalban as Mr. Rourke. Ricardo Montalban was born on November 25, 1920, in Mexico City, Mexico. At 57 years old, he played Mr. Rourke, the enigmatic, all-knowing host who shaped guests' destinies, in Fantasy Island beginning in 1977. Across all 148 episodes, he became the show's unmistakable center, a symbol of elegance, mystery, and controlled power. But when the cameras stopped, he carried his own private heartbreaks. His marriage to Georgiana Young remained steadfast throughout nearly half a century. Yet this stability came with its own sorrow. Caring for their children while fighting the industry's racial barriers drained him emotionally, and founding the Nosotros Foundation pulled him into constant legal and financial stress. When Georgiana died in 2007 after 63 years together, the loss hollowed him in ways he rarely revealed, a wound that deepened the silence in his final years. His physical pain, too, was relentless. A catastrophic spinal injury during escape from the Planet of the Apes left him with chronic agony for the rest of his life, worsening until he required a wheelchair. Still, he kept acting, kept lending his voice to beloved films, kept showing up even when his body resisted every movement. Tragically, Ricardo Montalban died on January 14, 2009, at age 88, passing away at his Los Angeles home from congestive heart failure brought on by age and decades of physical decline. He was laid to rest at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City. At the end of his life, his net worth, about $10 million, reflected not luxury, but the lifetime of work, resilience, and dignity that he carried long after the final fantasy faded. Christopher Hewett as Lawrence. Christopher Hewett was born on November 1, 1921, in Worthing, England. At 62 years old, he played Lawrence, the refined, soft-spoken assistant who replaced Tattoo, in the final season of Fantasy Island in 1983. His 22-episode run arrived just as the series struggled with ratings, and when cancellation came, it left him abruptly without work. And from that moment, the quiet unraveling of his private life began to deepen. His romantic life had long been marked by silence and sorrow. Hewett lived openly as a gay man at a time when Hollywood punished honesty. The man who charmed audiences on Broadway endured something far lonelier offstage: the death of the partner he never publicly named, lost to AIDS in the 1980s. Financial pressures intensified the pain. 2 failed investments in theater left him bankrupt twice, turning artistic passion into a source of shame. Alcohol became both refuge and enemy, worsening the toll on his already fragile health. Even as he earned acclaim with Mr. Belvedere and held on to cherished memories of his Tony-winning stage work, his body began to betray him. Complications from diabetes slowly dimmed his vision and weakened his kidneys, trapping him in a life shrinking by degrees. The elegance he projected on stage contrasted sharply with the isolation he endured behind closed doors. Christopher Hewett died on August 3, 2001, at age 80 at his Los Angeles home from complications of diabetes. His memorial service at St. Victor's Church in West Hollywood. At the time of his passing, his net worth, around $2 million, stood as the final remnants of a life built from theater, television, and the determination to remain himself in an industry that often rejected him. Herve Villechaize as Tattoo. Herve Villechaize was born on April 23, 1943, in Paris, France. At 34 years old, he played Tattoo, the mischievous, unforgettable assistant whose cry, "Deplane, deplane," became television history. in Fantasy Island from 1977 to 1983. His presence made him inseparable from the show's identity. Yet behind that iconic role lay a life already fraying at the edges. His marriages were marked by turmoil that fame only intensified. His first wife, Ann Sadowski, saw her relationship collapse under the weight of infidelity, public mockery, and the relentless scrutiny surrounding their stark physical differences. His second marriage to Camille Hagen unraveled even faster. 15 months of volatility fueled by alcohol abuse, emotional outbursts, and accusations of violence that neither could escape from. And just as he tried to steady himself professionally, the fallout from Fantasy Island consumed him. He demanded a tenfold salary increase, was fired, and watched Hollywood turn its back on him, even as audiences still adored his earlier work like The Man with the Golden Gun. By the mid-1980s, the pressures that followed him from childhood had deepened into something darker. The pain caused by his medical condition grew unbearable, his organs pressing against a body too small to contain them, forcing him to sleep kneeling just so he could breathe. Depression shadowed every attempt at recovery, worsened by alcoholism and a reputation for inappropriate behavior on set. His sudden disappearance from major roles left him with fewer chances to rebuild. Sadly, he died at age 50 on September 4, 1993, from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at his home in North Hollywood, leaving behind a recorded message and a note describing pain he could no longer endure. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered into the Pacific Ocean off Point Fermin. At the time of his death, his remaining net worth, around $600,000, reflected not success lost, but the battles that had consumed nearly all he once earned. Carol Lynley, as Catherine Harris. Carol Lynley was born on February 13, 1942 in New York City, USA. At 35 years old, she played Catherine Harris, a recurring guest whose elegance and emotional depth shaped her appearances when she joined Fantasy Island in 1977. Across 11 episodes from 1977 to 1984, she became one of the show's most recognizable guest stars. Yet behind the polished performances was a woman still carrying the wounds of a turbulent rise to fame. Her adult life was marked by the shadows of battles she fought when she was still barely old enough to understand them. As a teenager, she became embroiled in a scandal after being pushed into film work at 15, sparking a bitter dispute with Hollywood that trailed her for years. The fame that followed brought more pressure than stability. Her marriage to Michael S. Gang collapsed under the strain, and losing custody of her daughter left a grief she rarely discussed but never escaped. As her career advanced into the 1970s, alcohol dependence began to shape her choices. She turned down major roles, lost her Disney contract, and felt her once bright trajectory dimming before her eyes. Even during the highs of the Poseidon Adventure, a performance that brought her close to Oscar recognition, her private life grew more fragile. Depression lingered in the background, worsened by inconsistent work and the emotional cost of a business quick to discard the women it once celebrated. By the time she returned to Fantasy Island for her final episodes, she carried the weight of losses that no script could soften. Carol Lynley died on September 3, 2019, at age 77 from a sudden heart attack at her home in Pacific Palisades, California. She was cremated, and her ashes were scattered at sea along the Southern California coast. At the time of her passing, her net worth of about $3 million reflected the long arc of a career shaped by talent, turmoil, and the resilience she held until the end. John Myhers, as Cal. John Myhers was born on August 8, 1922, in Taunton, Massachusetts. At 56 years old, he played Cal, the island's calm, observant bartender who appeared throughout the series, in Fantasy Island beginning in 1978. His role made him part of the show's familiar rhythm. Yet behind that steady presence was a man whose life had already been shaped by hardships. His marriage to Jane Dulo, though lasting 2 decades, strained under the weight of his unpredictable career and the lingering psychological damage from World War II. Serving overseas left him with wounds that did not bleed, but never healed, manifesting as depression and a cigarette habit that consumed him. As his career faltered in the 1970s, he refused several major roles to care for his ailing mother, plunging him into financial trouble and ultimately fractured his marriage. After the divorce, he withdrew from public life. Illness tightened its grip as the years progressed. A lifetime of heavy smoking culminated in advanced lung cancer, a slow erosion of breath and strength that forced him to retreat from the stage and screen he once commanded with quiet authority. Though he remained respected for his work in The Sound of Music, MASH, and his award-winning stage performances, his final years were spent fighting a disease that took far more than his voice. Sadly, John Myhers died on September 4, 1992, at age 70, after a rapid decline from terminal lung cancer. He was buried at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills. His remaining net worth, about $1.5 million, reflected decades of steady but often interrupted work, marked by sacrifice, loyalty, and battles no one outside his family ever truly saw. Carolyn Jones as Clora McAllister. Carolyn Jones was born on April 28, 1930, in Amarillo, Texas. At 49 years old, she appeared on Fantasy Island in 1979 as Clora McAllister, a poised, enigmatic guest whose episodes echoed her own real-life strength and fragility. She brought a blend of grace and shadow that audiences instantly recognized. Behind the performance, however, she was fighting battles far more painful than anything written in a script. Her marriage to television titan Aaron Spelling had once promised stability, but behind closed doors it became defined by emotional turmoil and allegations of controlling, damaging behavior. The glamour of the 1950s and 60s offered her fame, awards, and the world's attention, especially with The Addams Family, where she reinvented Morticia as an icon. But stardom could not erase the trauma still carried from that broken marriage. During her final years, she continued to act with a resolve that astonished colleagues. She filmed scenes in a wheelchair, telling friends she was merely recovering from ulcers, refusing to let them see how quickly the disease was spreading. In private, she fought through exhaustion, loneliness, and the fear of leaving her career unfinished, yet she never stopped showing up. Sadly, Carolyn Jones died on August 3, 1983, at age 53 after slipping into a coma caused by advanced colon cancer. She was cremated the next day, her ashes inurned beside her mother. At the time of her death, her net worth of about $2 million marked the legacy of a career built on resilience, talent, and a bravery she rarely allowed the world to see. Dack Rambo as Prince Peter D'Anatoli. Dack Rambo was born on September 13, 1941 in Sunnyvale, California. At 37 years old, he appeared as Prince Peter D'Anatoli, a charming, aristocratic fantasy figure, in Fantasy Island beginning in 1978. His 6-episode run between 1978 and 1984 showcased his elegance and screen magnetism. But off-camera, he was a man living with grief, secrecy. The death of his identical twin brother Dirk in a 1967 car accident left him with a trauma that resurfaced throughout his life as PTSD. It strained his marriage to Mary Jane Wheeler and ultimately contributed to their divorce in 1969. Though his career flourished in shows like Dallas and The Guns of Will Sonnet, he carried a loneliness that success could not fill. The pressure to hide his bisexuality in an unforgiving industry pushed him into years of silence, internal conflict, and the dangerous escape of alcohol and prescription drugs. When he finally reached a place of personal honesty in the early 1990s, the truth brought devastating consequences. In 1991, while filming Another World, he learned he was HIV positive. His decision to publicly reveal both his diagnosis and his bisexuality just weeks after actor Brad Davis died made him one of the first major TV stars to speak openly about the stigma others hid from. Hollywood responded with distance, lost roles, and closed doors, leaving him to navigate illness without the career he had rebuilt. Dack Rambo died on March 21, 1994, at age 53, from complications of AIDS, leaving behind a legacy of bravery in a decade when so few dared to speak. His net worth, approximately $1 million, reflected a career of steady work cut short by illness and the harsh realities of the era. Ken Berry as Larry Barber. Ken Berry was born on November 16, 1933, in Moline, Illinois. At 45 years old, he appeared on Fantasy Island in 1978 as Larry Barber, the gentle, soft-spoken guest whose stories often masked quiet personal hurt. But behind those lighthearted performances was a man navigating pain that fame could never cure. Years before Hollywood embraced him, military service in Korea left him with injuries that caused chronic pain for decades. His marriage to Jackie Joseph began with creative joy, but gradually collapsed under career pressure and emotional fatigue, ending in 1976 with heartbreak neither ever fully escaped. Though he found renewed visibility through F Troop and later Mama's Family, the strain of his failing marriage often followed him onto sets, making every professional victory feel bittersweet. As he aged, the lingering damage from service-related injuries deepened, and complications with his heart began to surface. Yet he remained unfailingly kind, supportive to colleagues, and devoted to the craft that had given him an identity through every private sorrow. His quiet resilience became his final, most touching act. Sadly, Ken Berry died on December 1, 2018, at age 85, from heart-related complications in Burbank, California. He left behind a legacy of gentle humor, artistry, and perseverance, with an estimated net worth of around $3 million, built from decades of television and stage work. Roddy McDowall as Christopher Lantry. Roddy McDowall was born on September 17, 1928, in London, England. At 49 years old, he appeared as Christopher Lantry, a sophisticated, quietly tormented guest whose fantasies often masked deeper truths when he joined Fantasy Island in 1977. His episodes showcased the depth and precision that made him one of Hollywood's most enduring character actors. And yet, beneath the elegance of his screen presence was a man shaped by lifelong displacement and private battles. His adult life carried the aftershocks of World War II when he fled England. Though he became a respected star, winning an Emmy for The Fugitive and immortalizing himself in Planet of the Apes, his personal world was complicated by a secret he guarded fiercely. He was a gay man in an era when that truth could destroy a career. Living covertly meant forming relationships in the shadows, watching colleagues receive opportunities denied to him, and enduring a level of isolation no award could ease. That loneliness deepened as he grew older. Remaining unmarried by choice did not protect him from the whispers, the discrimination, or the grief of love lost quietly behind closed doors. Yet he filled decades with films, stage work, and prestigious board positions. When illness finally crept into his life, he faced it with the same grace that defined his career. Roddy McDowall died on October 3, 1998, at age 70, at his home in Studio City from pancreatic cancer. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered into the Pacific Ocean. At the time of his passing, his net worth, around $5 million, reflected a lifetime of relentless work and the dignity he carried even through silence. Phyllis Davis as Christy Robbins. Phyllis Davis was born on July 17, 1940, in Port Arthur, Texas. At 39 years old, she appeared on Fantasy Island in 1979 as Christy Robbins, the glamorous yet wounded presence whose fantasies often mirrored her own longing for safety and dignity. Her multiple appearances made her a familiar face on the series. But the real story behind that beauty and charisma was far darker than viewers knew. In the 1960s, she endured the brutal underbelly of Hollywood, exploitation, coercion, and the kind of sexual abuse that left scars no camera could capture. Though she later found success with Vegas, that trauma followed her throughout her life, shaping her relationships and her growing distrust of the industry. She never married, not because she lacked love, but because isolation felt safer than giving anyone the power to hurt her again. Her final years were marked by illness and solitude. Cancer crept quietly into her life, and with few close companions left from her Hollywood days, she faced the disease with the same stoic silence that had defined so much of her adulthood. Even as her body weakened, she took comfort in the roles that had once made her feel seen. Phyllis Davis died on September 27, 2013, at age 73 after a battle with cancer. She left behind a modest net worth of about $2.5 million, earned from decades of steady television work and her defining role on Vegas. Dennis Cole as Dr. Lloyd Hopper. Dennis Cole was born on July 19, 1940, in Detroit, Michigan. At 38 years old, he appeared on Fantasy Island in 1978 as Dr. Lloyd Hopper, the handsome, polished guest whose charm often masked a storm beneath. Across 5 episodes, he played roles of confidence, ease, and romantic fantasy. But off-camera, his life was already beginning to fracture in ways he could never escape. His greatest heartbreak arrived years later, the sudden death of his son, Joe, from drug shock in 1991, a tragedy so overwhelming that Cole slipped into a long, punishing depression. Though he continued working on the Rookies and General Hospital, the pain seeped into everything, turning once promising opportunities into reminders of what grief had taken from him. He tried rebuilding his life, but the emotional weight never fully lifted. His health began to decline as kidney failure slowly took hold, and the physical suffering mirrored the emotional wounds he had carried for decades. Finally, Dennis Cole died on November 15, 2009, at the age of 69 from complications of kidney disease. His memorial was modest, reflecting a life marked as much by heartbreak as by fame, and his estimated net worth of $1.2 million came from decades of steady television work. Cameron Mitchell as Raoul. Cameron Mitchell was born on November 4, 1918, in Dallastown, Pennsylvania. At 59 years old, he joined Fantasy Island in 1977 as Raoul, the intense, world-worn guest whose stories often mirrored the turbulence of his own life. His appearances captured a man carrying both charisma and exhaustion. And behind the camera, those shadows were far more real than audiences ever realized. By the 1970s, Mitchell's career had collapsed under crushing financial mismanagement, leaving him bankrupt twice and forced into low-budget exploitation films simply to stay afloat. His marriage to Rachel Forthman had ended years earlier, but its emotional fallout lingered, feeding a loneliness he tried to drown in alcohol. Even as he delivered critically respected work, from High Chaparral to Death of a Salesman, he battled the shame of watching a once promising career erode into survival mode. Drinking became both refuge and trap. Friends noted how his charm could shift suddenly into bitterness, a man at war with the world and with himself. Illness soon followed. The years of alcohol abuse weakened him just as lung cancer began its quiet, merciless advance. He kept acting, even when he no longer looked like the actor he had once been, clinging to the only identity he had left. Finally, Cameron Mitchell died on July 7, 1994, at age 75 from lung cancer in Pacific Palisades, California. He was buried at Desert Memorial Park. At the time of his death, his net worth, around $800,000, reflected a lifetime of brilliance eclipsed by hardship. Ann Mobley as Pamela Deering. Ann Mobley was born on February 17, 1937, in Brandon, Mississippi. At 41 years old, she appeared on Fantasy Island in 1978 as Pamela Deering, the elegant, warm presence whose episodes often carried themes of hope, healing, and second chances. Her 5 appearances showed the poise that had once made her Miss America 1959. But beneath that perfect image was a lifetime of private struggle. Long before Fantasy Island, her Miss America duties left her with chronic health issues that followed her for decades. Even as Hollywood celebrated her Golden Globe win and popular films like 3 on a Couch. Her marriage to Gary Collins brought glamour but also emotional distance, professional strain, and long periods of separation that eventually ended in divorce in 1981. Her later years grew more difficult as Crohn's disease flared relentlessly, each episode breaking down the strong facade she showed to the world. Then came her most painful battle. Stage 3 breast cancer, diagnosed in 2009, forcing her into a fight few knew was as brutal as it was prolonged. Yet she continued working, advocating, and appearing publicly with a determination that deeply moved those around her. Sadly, Ann Mobley died on December 9, 2014, at age 77 from breast cancer, passing quietly at home in Beverly Hills. Her net worth, around $4 million, reflected a lifetime of films, television work, and public service. Wendy Schaal as Julie Wendy Schaal was born on July 2, 1954, in Chicago, Illinois. At 27 years old, she joined Fantasy Island in 1981 as Julie, the bright, gentle assistant who stepped into Mr. Rourke's world after Tattoo's departure. Her 20-plus episodes made her the most enduring recurring cast member from the later seasons. But behind that effortless charm was a woman carrying far more pressure than audiences ever realized. Her marriage to Stephen M. Schwartz had begun with enthusiasm, yet the demands of constant television work and rising Hollywood expectations slowly created distance neither could repair. By 1987, the relationship unraveled, leaving Schaal to navigate single motherhood while managing the unpredictable nature of acting careers. Films like Inner Space and The Burbs brought visibility, but each role came with the emotional weight of juggling public life and private disappointment. As the industry shifted in the 1990s, on-camera opportunities faded, and Schaal quietly transitioned into voice acting. The success of American Dad gave her a renewed sense of purpose, letting her rebuild a life grounded not in Hollywood chaos, but in craft, routine, and the steadiness she once lost. It was a quieter chapter, but one that finally allowed peace after decades of strain. In 2025, Wendy Schaal is 71 years old, still devoted to voice work and choosing serenity, family, and artistic consistency. Her estimated net worth of around $8 million reflects decades of television, film, and nearly 400 episodes of American Dad, a career built with resilience rather than spectacle. So that's all our video. Which of these forgotten stars moved you the most? And whose story should we uncover next? If you enjoy these hidden Hollywood histories, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video so more people can rediscover the lives behind the legends.